Oh, very good. Yeah, just in terms of the background. So my name is Kopiagek. I'm the new director of the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center, and we've been involved in the ARTeCHÓ project to study the role of blockchain as an enabler for new artistic expressions. We, as a blockchain center, we come more from the financial side of things, but that doesn't mean the infrastructure can't support both. And just in terms of sort of situating this, why the role of blockchain is so pivotal in this project, it's a question of how do you make digital objects and digital art as as a particular example, how do you make that unique? How do you create provenance and authenticity? How do you create sort of property rights and intellectual property using the technology? And that offers fascinating possibilities for artists at the moment to use this new technology to create new kinds of artwork in ways that gives them control over the art that would be very difficult to create in the traditional sense. So in the ARTeCHÓ project, it was really all about like how do we merge technology with artists and sort of the policy recommendations that we can give out to policymakers to say how do we in the European Union support this kind of new technology in the artist and creative industry in general in using this technology. So that's just sort of from the high level overview. Yeah, very excited to be part of this panel.
Thank you so much, Carl. We're also joined by an esteemed panel of experts like ARTeCHÓ, who just gave the introduction. We also have Dr. Joachim Schwen, the principal economist at DG GROW. European Commission will offer insights into the policy landscape. We're also joined by Dr. Alex Zarifs from the University of Southampton, specializing in business model of digital assets. And last but not least, Kirsten Gold, an art market strategist who will share perspectives on the evolving role of NFTs and blockchain in the traditional art market. Our agenda today will cover key questions around the alignment of stakeholders' interest in the digital art market, the implications of emerging technologies such as generative AI and the metaverse, and lastly, the intersection of these developments with currency policy frameworks in the EU. To start us off, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and share a little bit about the work and their current interests. Then I'll get into questions. I'll start with you, Professor Kopiagek.
Thanks. Yeah, already said like I'm the new director for the Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. Originally, for the past 10 years, I was in South Africa at the University of Cape Town, engaging in blockchain and emerging markets, also with sort of several projects in the technology and art space. Yeah, and I think that's enough for me, and just hand over to one of the other panelists. Maybe Alex, since your name starts with an A, you go next.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Dr. Alex Zarifis. I've been researching blockchain, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and so on since 2013. So I've had some experience looking at how technologies based on blockchain emerge, how some are successful, some less successful, the kind of opportunities they offer, how they build trust, so on and so forth. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about these issues today.
Shall I move on then? Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten. I'm an art market strategist working at the intersection of art and technology. I'm working with art market players from the more traditional art market, like galleries, institutions, and foundation, and working on digital transformation, business model innovation. I am also serving as an art tech and culture tech startup advisor and mentor at VC accelerators. I've co-founded and I'm the author of the Art and Tech Report, which is an independent research initiative, and we've been examining the impact of technology onto the art world for quite some time now. And I'm a regular speaker and lecturer, bridging the topics of art, business, and technology. And very happy to be here today and looking forward to our conversation. And I'm handing over to Dr. Joachim Schwerin.
That is excellent. Thank you so much, Kerstin. Principal economist in the unit that is responsible for the digital transformation of industry at the European Commission. We are responsible for the real economy, and I've been developing blockchain policy for the last 10 years for all sorts of real economy applications for industry, but also small and medium-sized enterprises in our industrial ecosystem, which include the cultural sector, of course. I'm also involved in all types of financial initiatives, such as the work on the MiCA regulation, the work on the digital euro, and other things. And we are also working with the colleagues in the House because we are already now using NFTs at a very large scale, for example, for industrial projects to detect fake products, but also for other initiatives that we have, where basically we work with digital twins, where documents are certified based on NFTs. So we have a very positive approach towards NFTs, and this is also why in the Commission draft for MiCA, we excluded it from financial regulation.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists. I'd just like to inform everyone watching on YouTube in the live stream that please feel free to send any questions you might have in the chat, and we'll address them at the end of the panel. As you'd all see, the art market and all the speakers we have on the panel come from a diverse range of backgrounds, and this really shows us all the stakeholders in the art market that make it possible. I'll now get into our first theme, the first question, which is related to the stakeholders in the digital art market. I'd like to start off with you, Kirsten. What unique opportunities or challenges do blockchain and NFTs provide for artists and collectors, given your range of experience?
I think that's a very complex question, so I'm trying to be very sharp and short here. But I would love to start with the fact that I think blockchain and NFT as a technology, thanks to those, we have seen first and foremost an enormous rise of digital art. And digital art has been around since the 60s, so it's not new. But only thanks to digital assets now being scarce, being unique, it has gained in artistic appreciation and in value. It has entered the canon and the art market, which has been long overdue. And I think this sets the foundation for the main evolution. Now, when you ask about artists, I would definitely say the same. Digital artists have been around for a very long time and are finally receiving more artistic appreciation. They're getting shown and curated and contextualized, which is great. At the same time, blockchain as a creative medium is a new medium to any artist. And we also see even traditional artists exploring it as a creative medium, pushing boundaries and identifying or creating completely new forms of art, such as generative art or dynamic NFTs. But I would say, speaking for the artist side, the biggest chance and the biggest opportunity is the redistribution of power. So the shift of power back to the artist side, meaning they own their data, they own their work, they can monetize their work, they can sell it directly without having the need to go through any gatekeeper or intermediary. And they can maintain direct relationship to their collector space. And last but not least, at least in theory, they can participate immediately in their revenues and also, in theory, their resale royalties in the secondary market. So I think that a lot of pros the artistic side has been gaining. But, you know, hearing or listening to this list of opportunities, it all comes with a huge demand for project management and community management on the artist side. So this is new, and it's clearly eating up time in an artist's life to do something he would normally invest in being creative. And also, I think you have to learn first. You have to educate and learn first, because last but not least, we are talking about blockchain. So every error will be eternal. So you need to know what you do before you start minting your work. If we look at the collector side, I would start with the very same thing. Collecting digital art has become very attractive for collectors because now it has a value and a market which hasn't been there before. And coming from a traditional art market, I would also stress that it is so much easier and more accessible to collect digital art. It's probably less intimidating than ringing a bell at a gallery on a Saturday afternoon. But what we've seen also from my very own research, I think what the collector side is appreciating very much when it comes to digital art is having a direct relationship with the artist. I mean, it's always been attempting, to be very close to the artist you desire. Now there's an opportunity to communicate directly, to buy directly. You don't need a gallery anymore. So that's very tempting. But also talking about challenges, I mean, again, you have to do your very own due diligence. There are still the risk for fraud, for scams. And if you're in there for investment, it's a very volatile market, so you need to make your homework. But I still remain very positive. I think as a sum, it's introducing blockchain and NFT, it's introducing new forms of art, it's opening up for new forms of collectors, it's proposing new opportunities for artists. I think it's something we are benefiting from all sides.
Thank you for that, Kirsten. I'll just like to hop on to what you said about new revenue streams and business models and address a question to Alex. From a business model perspective, what aspects of blockchain-based digital art might appeal to investors and collectors?
Thank you for that question. Like I said, I was researching blockchain and also business models. So this is something I looked into. So I've been looking at these issues for quite a while now. With NFTs, like other technologies, you should focus on whether the technology solves a problem. If it solves a problem, then it has a very good chance of being widely adopted, regardless of whether this adoption is immediate, gradual, or, as is often the case, you go through some hype first. People are often drawn in by the hype, then they realize it's not for them. But after the hype, the adoption picks up gradually. So NFTs solve the problem of ownership of digital content, so they have a future. So personally, we researched NFTs and we wanted to find the actual business models that are valid now across everything, not just art. And we found around 5 business models that do actually work right now. So they can produce revenue and support a business. And the creator of art utilizing NFTs and the platform selling them are 2 business models that are valid today. So this is a very positive thing for art because once someone can earn a living, more art will be created. And it fits the zeitgeist of our time in many ways. For example, many people have to move regularly for work. They change town or country. So they have this mindset of having a limited number of personal possessions. A person like that might not want to have a large painting. They know they're going to move in a few months. And it fits the zeitgeist in many other ways. Some people feel an emotional void in their life. People feel a need to belong somewhere. Owning art, whether it's something physical or digital, makes you feel part of a group of owners or fans. So there are these 2 valid business models.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'd like to now ask a question to Professor Copier-George. How is blockchain-based art different from pre-blockchain digital art, and which features of blockchain make it interesting for artists?
Yeah, I think it goes back to something that Kerstin said and Alex touched on, and that is the question of ownership and business model. In the past, the process of how art is created has the artist, but then afterwards, there were many other people involved. I always think back of the example of Vincent van Gogh. Without his brother Theo, he would have never just physically survived, I think, because it was so difficult for him to be exhibited in the beginning, which highlights the power that galleries and art dealers and so on have over the art market. A lot of that comes down to their ability to exhibit art to a broader community. And in a similar way, how digital private crypto assets have sort of changed the way that financial products are no longer just provided by big financial institutions, but where you have small solution providers finding niche communities. In a very similar way, you can have artists, as Kirsten said, create their own communities, and that speaks to this sense of belonging. And it's technology enabled because before blockchain, you always had to rely on central controllers and operators of infrastructure that would record, your image, whatever for you. The server operators would record the image. They had the ability, at the very least, to block access to it, if not change it. With blockchain, for the first time, artists have that control. And I think what we are seeing is with this new canvas, this new kind of material on which to create art, we are seeing a redistribution of power towards the artists, and maybe also towards the investors, because they get the provenance, they get the transparency, they get sort of a lot of things that are difficult to achieve in the traditional market. So I think the technology just shifts where the power sits in this system. I think that is really the post BC, post blockchain, world. What has changed to what was before. It makes new business models possible. It doesn't mean that they will always succeed. NFTs have gone through a giant hype and an equally big dip almost. So the question is whether we will see the next wave of digitally enabled innovation that leads to new artwork, or whether we will use the NFTs that we currently have and the way we're currently using them just to create more art on that system. Both is possible and both is exciting, but at the very least, it has really changed the power distribution and the nature in which art is created. And I think that's the most exciting example. And to be honest, I haven't seen this really before in the history of art. If you want to be very broad, and there's some hyperbole in here, the only time I've seen this is with the invention of the printing press, where you took the power away from a few centralized controllers of information distribution, mainly the church back in the day, to a much broader audience. But with blockchain, we're seeing the same happening for the art community at the moment.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I guess the glue that brings all of these different verticals together is the policymakers and the regulators. So I'd like to give Dr. Schwen an opportunity to provide any insights on how policy can address these varying incentives that the other speaker spoke about in the digital art market.
Thank you. We are very aware of the advantages that the technology brings to all sides of the markets. And as a representative of the public sector, let me start by saying that it's not for the public sector to decide what art is or what the business models regarding art should be. The big effect that we see, the positive effect of any form of tokenization that is based on blockchain, is the democratization of markets. We see that in finance. We also see that in the real economy, for which I am responsible. And when I take examples of previous events over the last years on NFTs that I have organized with the arts world, it is striking to see that, for example, when you speak to auction houses that had a few hundred people perhaps in a room in auctions previously and a few on the telephone, and now the moment that they engage on NFTs in a sort of metaverse environment, they have millions of people that engage. There's a massive interest in this, and this creates a lot of flexibility and also new business cases. I think from our perspective, the bottom line is that at this moment, we have a completely corrupted and dysfunctional internet dominated by big tech companies, which is basically the opposite of the decentralized Web3 that we want to achieve. And the Web3 is a sort of combination of metaverses where you create as communities values and you want to safely trade these values. These values can be arts, these values can be any other thing. It is for the community to decide what is of value and then find a vehicle of how to put this into a sort of container, transport it, trade it, and make a business out of this. And this is precisely what NFTs are doing. But also when you look at the gaming community, for example, where the future of our societal and industrial leaders will come from in a couple of years, they see that already as a natural propensity of the digital space. They are using avatars where NFTs are bringing an extra value layer that can, of course, be used in games, but that can also be commercialized. You see it with the big brands, for example, that are using NFTs to create an extra value when you have a physical car, but you can also have a digital twin that drives around, or with any other type of property. And this is extremely positive to have, because that creates a multitude of new business cases, which are basically in line with the creativity of people. And this is actually why we, at least in Europe, have taken a very positive perspective towards NFTs, not only in the cultural sector, as I said, but in all others. And I agree that there is a certain requirement to have a stable political and regulatory environment. I'm not commenting on the US, but I don't think what happens there on the arts markets and NFTs is a good practice example. And we have tried to do that by clarifying certain things in our regulation. We are also promoting these projects, but there's a number of things that I also see represented in the ARTeCHÓ report, where I think for the future there's a need for further clarification and help. But our bottom line is that we are extremely supportive of everything that I've heard so far in this discussion.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'd like us to now look forward towards the technological impact of things such as generative AI, metaverse, and the blockchain. We are witnessing rapid advancements in technology, as we'd all know. So the next question is really around how can blockchain serve as the foundational infrastructure to support these innovations? AI tools such as ChatGPT are most used in the developing world. People weren't aware. South Africa actually ranks in the top 10 of the users of ChatGPT. I'd now like to get into my first question for Kirsten. How do you envision NFTs and blockchain playing in the future of the art landscape, particularly as we see technologies like generative AI and the metaverse becoming more prominent?
I think we will see the influence on different layers, and one of them still being the layer of artistic production. So new evolving technologies like AI, like AR, like VR will always remain pushing boundaries and expanding the possibilities for artists to create art. And there needs to be a tech framework for these kind of art forms, which to me will be blockchain and NFTs, helping for these kind of new art forms to be traded, to be owned, to be monetized, to ensure provenance, authenticity. So it'll be like a tech infrastructure for tech-induced art, but blockchain still being a creative medium in itself as well. But then I think we will also see, not only within the art landscape, we will see the evolution of how to interconnect the virtual and the physical world in any part of your lives, in our lives, including the art world. So we will need a glue which is going to bridge and interconnect that, and this is going to be the concept of digital ownership, and it's not going to go away. It's such a huge innovation. I still think it needs to be explored further, but with new concepts evolving like collective ownership or dual ownership, which are all based on the concept of blockchain and making digital assets being scarce and unique, I think it's going to play a huge part in everyone's life sooner or later, implying or incorporating the art world. And I like Alex saying, there might be the case where you only want to have a digital version. I can very well see that you start to double your possession because you want it in both worlds, because you don't want to differentiate anymore. But maybe there's going to be art forms which will, combine both worlds. So the art will actually play on both worlds, being one art piece for you as a whole. So I think we are still early. I know this is a phrase we've been reiterating for very long now. I still think use cases within the art context are very young, but I do believe that blockchain will still play a major role thanks to the concept of digital ownership and being a creative medium.
Thank you, Kirsten. I now want to ask a question to Alex and Kopje. How can technology like generative AI and the metaverse benefit from blockchain as an infrastructure, based on what Kirsten has also informed us about?
If I can go first, so thank you for that question. It's a very interesting question. So generative AI gives you many things, but in most implementations, it does not give you a certainty, a confidence in the information given and the process it took. So there is usually limited transparency. So the point I'm making is not a criticism. I'm making this point because we need to appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of each technology so we can get the best out of them by combining them together. So generative AI does not typically encourage trust, but blockchain does. So many people say blockchain is a trustless technology. To a degree, I agree with that. Saying blockchain is a trustless technology doesn't cover everything. It's not the whole story. But it is true that you need to worry about less things when you have blockchain in your solution. And if the blockchain is implemented well, you do not need to trust certain people involved in terms of the process itself. So if someone is naive and they are the kind of person that bases their views on what is hyped and talked about most, then they will say, well, AI is talked about more now than blockchain. But if you are interested in providing the best solution to all kinds of organizations, art galleries, banks, forex, etc., then the increase in the use of AI increases the need for blockchain also. So we see organizations such as BIS encouraging the use of blockchain for central banks, for example. So these are very established, they're from traditional finance, they're not startups or DeFi. So it's clear that both incumbents and disruptors see the value of blockchain in an AI-centric world.
Yeah, maybe just to add briefly to this. Thanks. I think it's important to realize the role of blockchain more as an infrastructure than as an application of something. It is an information infrastructure in the technical sense of the word. I think it's also useful to remember that art, even the Mona Lisa, there's a Louvre version of it and there's a Prado version of it. One is more well known than the other, but both exist. And it has always been the case that artists have worked on like studies of artwork. So very often there are several versions, earlier versions, versions only in their studio that they worked on. Some artists have completely gone the other way and tried to create many copies of their artwork. Think of Warhol, and like there's famous examples along the whole spectrum. What is sort of core to them is this question of uniqueness and ownership. And with blockchain, you do have the possibility to play on that spectrum. Yes, you can create an individual representation. You can create 100 versions of it, and you know that there's only 100 versions of it. You know who owns them, or you can know who owns them. You can have the security that there's provenance and there's traceability of where the artwork comes from. And that really plays a fundamental role for the digital economy as a whole. This question of property rights, of public information, because that is what art is in essence. As an ingredient to something like generative AI, it is inevitable that we need to have this traceability of where information comes from, because these AI models suffer from what's called model collapse. So if you train them with AI-generated models, they will deteriorate. There's research showing this quite convincingly, right? So the question is, if we want to create a healthy, data ecosystem, a healthy data economy, a healthy data society, we do need a foundation for it that provides property rights to individuals or to collectives, or anything on that spectrum. And it's very useful to look back into our history to see where have we seen this before. And art is particularly useful in this regard, because many of the things that we are talking about in sort of new clothes we have seen before in different forms. And it's very useful for the technologists to learn sort of from the artists and the history of art, because it can tell us something about how the technology will will evolve.
Thank you, Gon. I'd now like to ask Dr. Schwen a question relating to what we just discussed. Do you have any thoughts on how these emerging technologies align with the current EU policy framework?
I think that the current EU policy framework is characterized by fundamental support for the potential of blockchain or DLT in general, because it is a revolutionary technology that, in my opinion, brings humanity back to its roots, which was not a domination through unproductive intermediaries that basically take the possession of other people, but enable, in a self-organized process, individuals to act within communities and create value. So I completely agree that what we're talking about here, at least when it comes to blockchain, is a process of creating a sort of common infrastructure where a lot of new opportunities are possible, and then giving tools for governance for the processes to the people that drive this, which basically brings the value layer. And this is actually something that Kerstin alluded to, which I very much liked. This is when we are moving towards this immersive Web3 with metaverses and things that are coming up. It is indeed a meaningful combination between online and offline. I'm the last person that is in favor of blind digitalization. And I think Alex said that very clearly. There must be a solution to a problem. But this is, I think, what we offer here. And if we come away from a passive consumption attitude that we nowadays see with smartphone and Web 2.0, where our society, let's be very clear on that, is becoming more dumb and more ill every day by using meaningless technology applications, and get them more active and creative as a sort of user-driven community, this is a very positive approach. When I, for example, listen to music, I follow the Berliner Philharmoniker online in the digital concert hall, which is extremely good. But sometimes I go to Berlin just to sit in the room and listen to them, because that gives me an added value of experience. And this is what we're talking about here, because I could condense that added value, which is a value proposition to me, together with the original experience. We have these examples in Prague with the Lobkowitz castle on the Non-fungible castle project, where they have their arts collection and where they tokenize arts. Imagine they have a symphony of Haydn in the handwriting of Mozart to listen to that. Now imagine you listen to that Haydn symphony, you see the handwriting of Mozart, and you could also at the same moment have your immersive experience that you share with others. Is that not a new value proposition that can be beneficial to you, but also help create a market? And this is, I think, what is very positive, plus that the blockchain guarantees the protection of the IP rights, so basically the certification, which is the opposite towards AI, where we have massive amounts of dumped data where we don't see the provenance. It has its advantages when it comes to checking smart contracts and doing many other things, but I think a meaningful combination of technology in a digital domain will always have to involve blockchain, because there is no other technology that can actually cater for this. And these are massive advantages that we see, where then, of course, certain clarifications have to be done. And if you allow me a last remark on this sector, that already brings me also to the regulatory perspective, because you asked for that. I mentioned that we included NFTs from the MiCA regulation, because we don't think that they are crypto assets. They are certainly not financial instruments as we see them. But some text has crept into the current version of the MiCA regulation in the political process, when perhaps it's part of large collections and when it's just fractional changes, etc. This asks very important questions in the arts context, in the cultural context of what is actually arts. And Ko-Pierre has alluded to that with the various copies of the Mona Lisa. We see that in very many circumstances that actually art is a living thing. And for example, in the medieval times, we had the situation, it has also been alluded to briefly before, when the church endorsed certain pieces of arts, the price rose immensely just because the church was positive to that. We saw that, for example, in the Byzantine environment, but also in other areas. That's a little bit the same here. There are some hypes in the community, which means that there can indeed be a financial perspective when it comes to pure value creation. And then the question has to be asked, to what extent does that actually raise regulatory concern? But the bottom line of what we're discussing here is that in the main use cases, we are talking here about a democratic technology that has many positive beneficials, and where we need to safeguard against certain forms of misuse, perhaps, but it is not for the public sector to decide what is intelligent and what is dumb behavior. We have to only take care of criminal behavior, and that is very limited. We know that from studies in the domain, but, and that's my very last remark, we also have to protect the artists. I know some digital artists very well, some leading digital artists, and some of them have told me that, for example, fraudulent people have created fake social media profiles in their name, have marketed their products. They found it very difficult to work against that. So solving basic problems like protecting digital identity, like ensuring that the process we're describing here can be safely done, and indeed that we can trust the technology, is very important for regulators. And for that, we have to go into granular details to understand the functionality of the arts markets, not to prevent, but to protect those that use the process.
Thank you to all the panelists. I'm just seeing if there's any questions in the chat. I can't see any now, but I'll let all the panelists just give their closing remarks, starting with you, Kopje-George.
Yeah, something that Joachim mentioned is a very important point about the intellectual property. And so at the moment, we are in a regime where we have intellectual property, which is expensive to create and even more expensive to defend. Yes, there's very good protection for it, but that protection has its limitations, and there's sort of a big impact on innovative capacity overall. On the other end of the spectrum, there's maybe trademarks, which are much weaker, but then there isn't really a lot, to be completely honest, where you have some level of protection. It's either this very expensive 1 or this very cheap 0. And one of the applications of blockchain and NFTs in particular is to have, a version of protection, or to be able to enforce a version of protection much cheaper. That should empower creators, and I think that's an important thing to do. And from the European perspective, it strikes me as particularly valuable to think about, like, what is the European model? Like, how do we approach the digital economy and the digital society going forward? And what separates us from the US, which is very market focused, and China maybe on the other extreme, which is very state focused. And I think it's this value focus. So of trying to implement European values in the infrastructure, in the technology that we support. And I think that shows through in a lot of what the EU does. In the MiCA regulation, you alluded to that. I think sometimes it's a bit of a hit and miss, to be completely honest. There's lots of good stuff in there. There's some things where you can see how a complex political process leads to complex results, right? But I think that I've not seen the same kind of decisiveness in any other market-based economy to sort of create this new tools and to protect the values that underlie our society. I think that's very encouraging to see this going forward.
Alex, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So I just want to reiterate that when you're looking at a new technology, you need to look at it from many sides, from different perspectives, look at how it's being utilized in different sectors. So if you work in finance, for example, and you're very focused on implementing blockchain in finance, it will be really helpful to take a step back and look at how blockchain is being implemented in other areas, such as the arts sector. And we can all learn from each other and come up with the best solutions and business models to move forward.
Kirsten?
Well, coming from the traditional art world, I can say, and probably that doesn't come as a surprise, that most art market entrepreneurs are very often quite hesitant when it comes to digitization or tech evolution, which is quite in contrast to the fact that it's always been artists pushing boundaries by making use of new technologies, if we think about photography or video, and also understanding the mediums of our time, if we talk about contemporary art, as the creative medium to create something new. So I love to think of art as a kind of catalyst, helping us to understand what tech and tech advancement are capable of, or to see art as the ultimate use case to facilitate mass adoption, I would say, to make understandable what tech entering our lives, our world, is capable of doing, and help me understand how it does it without being too tech or too complex.
Thanks, Kirsten. And last but not least, Duncan.
I'm happy to add to these very pertinent remarks that I would encourage everyone listening today, watching this later, or being anyhow involved in the arts markets to get actively involved with just experimenting with the opportunities that we have. Kerstin said basically that arts markets are driven by the artists, by radical artists. I completely agree. We also have a lot of radical people, including myself, I must say, when it comes to Web3 and blockchain and how we really democratize rotten markets that have been corrupted for centuries by intermediaries. And I think now we have the tools at hand to learn. I myself, just by way of example, find sometimes very difficult to deal with contemporary art. I try to resort to things that I know for longer and for better, because it's difficult for me to find too much what I like, but at least it's a sort of inspiration. And of course, we now have many more things that can come into our everyday life, which is very positive. Imagine that in the past, for example, you went to the Louvre once if you were lucky to see the Mona Lisa. Now we have the opportunities to get engaged in very different forms, however we want, with this piece of art, but with basically every piece of art. We can become creators ourselves. We can make value propositions. We can support our favorite musicians. It was already in the 80s when I was listening to my favorite band then that got disenchanted by its record company and basically became independent and only did private shows and had a community to that. We didn't have the digital tools at the time to do that, but in a way it was also a democratization of this market. So there is an endless array of opportunities. And last remark is, let me be very clear on this, mistakes will happen. I see that also in endless financial regulations, which are discussions which I find very tiring, that people are trying to push and push and push to get the digital economy into zero crime. And therefore, regulation. I'm completely opposed to that. I mean, a society where we have zero crime is a society that is completely totalitarian and probably the least interesting society I would like to live in. We make our mistakes. The art sector is full of things that have gone wrong, but maybe for that reason have become interesting. So we will never be in a situation where policy making or regulation can ring fence again anything that can go wrong. But the mere fact that we are experimenting, that we are innovating, is an artistic process in itself. And I think, therefore, the arts market is best placed to move forward the discussion that we have on tokenization, which we, of course, also have in many other sectors. And we will remain very positive to help that steer. But the creativity is not for us to decide. The creativity is for the market, and we will support that.
Thank you, everyone. If there's no further questions, I'd like to bring this panel discussion to a close. Thank you to my esteemed panelists. It's been an honor moderating, and I've learned a lot myself. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.